Starting to get a little spicy. It's Picante time. Peacock and Aponte. We're talking San Francisco 49ers. It's time to do a little mock draft. How actually easy or difficult will it be for the 49ers to replace all of their numerous needs now through the 2025 NFL draft? And Aponte's got some inside info now from Iowa State offensive coordinator on Brock Purdy, what it was like to coach that young man, and some prospects that could potentially be San Francisco 49ers in this upcoming draft. And it's coming up all right now. We're going overtime, Picante style. What's happening, everybody? Jason, how are you? What's going on, man? You've been a busy guy today. You're writing articles. You're being a real actual journalist over there at Niners Nation. Before we get to this little mock draft, and the mock draft is already done, so we're not going to take a lot of time doing it. But I do want to get into the idea of, who have the 49ers actually lost? How difficult will it be to replace? Are there any irreplaceable pieces that the 49ers lost in free agency, considering, injuries and who they lost? And I know there's a lot of players, but how actually difficult will it be for the 49ers to stick the landing and retool here on the fly through the 2025 NFL draft? Some comments from GM John Lynch about the plan. What is that plan exactly? I want to start, though, by highlighting some of your work today, Jason, on Niners Nation. Talk about your conversation with the Iowa State offensive coordinator and what he said about the potential 49ers in the draft, and especially young Brock Purdy that he coached once upon a time.
Yeah, it was really cool to connect with Taylor, and he was more than willing to sit down with me. I mean, he's even on vacation right now in New York with his wife to go to a Rangers game tonight, and he still was able to give me some of his time. And I really wanted to talk to him because I've been a big fan of Jalen Noel through the draft process, and I got a little bit of pushback saying, well, he's a little bit smaller, and sometimes I think that we get a little bit lost in the measurements as opposed to route running acumen, how guys get themselves open. That's why the last comp that I gave you was faster DJ Moore. And Taylor found the tweet after Jalen Noel retweeted it. And that's kind of how we connected. But he spoke glowingly about Jalen Noel. And obviously he's going to talk up his guys. But that's what he was there to do, was to talk up his guys. And he felt that they needed all the attention that they deserved. And he talked up about the fact that he's a guy who literally will be in the building, the biggest guy in the room, even though his frame doesn't mean that. A leader, somebody who is great in every single spot. Same thing with Jaden Higgins, talking about how everyone's kind of throwing this jump ball stuff at him, and he's just a contested catch guy. But how good he is getting off of the ball, and how good he is as a route runner as well, too, and how they designed some of their plays for Jaden to be the man beater, Jalen to be the zone beater. And it was just interesting to get into that when he was talking about it. He's obviously the offensive coordinator. He just started there this year, but he's been with the program for 9 years. So obviously I steered the conversation towards Brock Purdy and how it was with Brock Purdy being there. And he thinks the world of him. And obviously, again, he's going to say all these nice things about him, but he just says that it's an it factor. He's always on guys for the finer details, the shorter things. He's a team first guy. And he talked about how one of the things that stuck out, and obviously I'm going to get into what he said about the contract. One of the things that he said that really stuck out to me was about how he was there in Philadelphia right after Brock Purdy hurt his elbow. And he said that nobody was more hurt than him, and not because of the injury, because he wanted so badly to bring it home for San Francisco, and how that was because he was there with him at that time. Just spoke to the acumen again and the team first aspect. And of course, I asked him about the contract, and he said, if there's a holdup, even though he said, I don't know the specifics, he said, if there is a holdup, I don't know if there is. Money is not the deciding factor for Brock Purdy, and it's not going to be from Brock's side, that he just wants to play football and he wants to get to the end of his career and get to Illinois and fish, and you don't need a lot of money for that. But he spoke glowingly about all three guys, and especially the part about Brock when he was saying about how devastated he was after the NFC Championship and how bad he wants to be here and win for the 49ers. I take it with a grain of salt. Obviously we don't know what's going on with the contract negotiations, but it's always nice to hear those things about somebody that could be the potential franchise quarterback for how long with the 49ers.
Yeah, Brock doesn't have to worry about the money because that's what he hired an agent for. So the agent can say, no, we're going to 60. We're going to 60 million a year. I mean, hopefully this thing can get done. And Brock does seem like the type of guy that's not going to really try to get every single penny he can potentially out of the 49ers and make this thing ugly. But If he's not going if they're not getting what they think they're worth, I
Mhm.
could see this thing going deep into the summer. And obviously that will hurt the 49ers season. We saw what it did with Trent and Brandon Ayuk last year. And then both guys ended up getting hurt too. And so Brock Purdy could hurt his long-term career by not being ready for the season and throwing himself in there. So it's cautionary tale for everybody involved with the way the season went for the 49ers in 2024. By
Yeah,
the way,
definitely.
real
No,
quick
definitely. Mhm.
with Jaden Higgins, that's T. Higgins' brother.
Yes.
I
And
didn't know that.
I asked about that as well too, and I said, "How much of that plays a factor into it?" And he goes, "I don't know how much that plays a factor into it." He goes, "I just know that when I'm leaving the building, he's still working. He watches more film than any of the guys there. And when we need a play, we know that we can go to him or Jalen, and they're the two superstars in our program." So yeah, I mean that was the first thing I asked is just how much does it help to have somebody, like that as his brother? But that's some strong ass genes in that family there,
Oh,
right?
no doubt. And
Yeah.
obviously, everyone can go to Niners Nation and see the whole article that Jason wrote there about that conversation. Some fascinating stuff. But my question is, how does T. Higgins' little brother, who's 6'4", runs a 4.47? Not that Iowa State's not a good program, but how is he not at Bama or Ohio State or something? Like that should have been a 5-star, right? How's that even happen?
Well, I asked that question too about the whole scouting process and what it takes, and he said Iowa is so small that you're a celebrity when you're there. And it's important to know that, you can get lost in the weeds in different places, right? But you're a celebrity because everyone knows who you are. And they're not the type that'll be at the bar or doing bottle service or anything like that. It really makes them focus in on football and the job of being a good football player and also carrying yourself in the right way. So to me, he was explaining it as a good thing that you go to a place where everybody knows you because it forces you to act right and also just focus in on football because there's not much else. And he was very frank. There's not much else to do in Iowa. Like he was being very honest.
It's like, was it Jordan Matthews talking about playing for the Buffalo Bills, and they had a bunch of kids while he was there. He's like, well, there's not nothing else to do. Uh, so yeah, dude, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. I like when I put on the Iowa State because you know all the prospects and you know the names, and I didn't look at the tape of either one of them until after the combine, and I was like, why weren't people talking about these guys from Iowa State more? Is it because of the college or the helmet scouting? Because they're both legit. Jalen, is it Noel or Noel?
It's Noel the way that
Noel.
he explains it. It's
Okay.
Noel. But I mean, either way, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a egregious mistake when it comes to
No.
like saying his name, I don't think. Yeah.
And Jalen Noel, like out of the slot, how dynamic he is. He can get deep. And he's a complete receiver, even though he's not the biggest guy. I don't have a huge problem with his size. It just means you're going to get him maybe at a little bit of a bargain. And Jaden Higgins, I was surprised with him too. Is like, yeah, he's not just a jump ball specialist. Dude could run routes. He's clearly put in work. Like he's ready to go. Like that guy might be, just by running 4.47 too at his size. If you don't get Tet McMillan early, and to be honest with you, some teams might not have much of a difference. Who knows? Some teams might have Higgins over Tet McMillan. They're very similar now. When you put them, they're exactly the same height, exactly the same weight. And, at Tet's best reported time, they have the same 40 speed as well. So Jaden Higgins, legit. If he's there at 46, 49ers, we'll find out what happens with Brandon Ayuk. Wide receiver might become a huge need if the Niners swing this big deal like some people are reporting out of New England that there is some interest there, and there could be a trade of Brandon Ayuk before the draft. We'll see. Wide receiver need might go way up. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, both nice fits for the Niners.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I explained this too to Taylor is if I doubled down on college football, I would have no time to be with, my kids, right? Like I would never be able to see them because it's so hard. So I get into this stuff at the end, and the Senior Bowl was my introduction to both of them. And then I went back and watched the tape, and the both of them were winning their one-on-ones, and that's where I really learned about Jalen Noel because he had this one rep in particular that looked like a Sunday catch where he had to make this adjustment at the ball on the sideline and just again great feet, great awareness of where he was on the field and great hands. And then there was another rep where literally the cornerback is draped all over him, holding him, and he fights through it and still makes the catch. Just the play strength, I think, is something that is being lost because of his frame. And then Jaden Higgins was just mossing guys the entire time that he was there. So that really opened my eyes to them. And I was late to the party myself.
Let's talk 49ers offseason. And at Stanford's pro day, and by the way, John Lynch has been doing his pro day circuit. Just about everybody in the scouting department was at Oregon for that pro day. There's numerous prospects there. He was talking with Jeffrey Bossa, the linebacker from Oregon. Obviously, there's Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle, could be first, maybe high second round guy. There is Josh Connerly, also a first, probably maybe even a high second round player. Numerous prospects there for the Oregon Ducks, and then they're at Stanford's pro day right in their backyard. And Io Manor, the former hockey player and wide receiver who plays football like hockey and will block the heck out of you. I know Kyle Shanahan's going to like that. But reporters caught up with John Lynch at the Stanford pro day, Jason, and he said the 49ers have a plan and they are excited to execute it. That sounds to me like there's a little bit more going on under the surface than like, oh, we have 11 picks and we're going to draft players. Like that's it sounds like there's more to the plan than that.
Sounds like there's excitement. And I think again, when you're coming off a draft that you had done so well, you want to keep it going. I know that it's year to year, but it's almost like when you're going well in baseball, the worst thing that can happen for you is an off day. You want to get right back in there and you want to get right back in the box because you're feeling it. And I think there is a little bit of a feeling around this organization based on the last draft and how well they did and all the value that they found that they can do it again. Again, walking away with 4 starters and still results pending on Isaac Garendo and Jacob Cowing puts you in a spot where everything is looking good, you know? And again, the 49ers don't necessarily need a huge hit like an all pro. I mean, that'd be really nice, you know, obviously at 11, but hits vary and there's a spectrum. You know, you've got roster mainstays, you've got starters, you've got pro bowlers, you've got all pros, and all of those can be defined as hits. But I think there is a little bit of confidence when I heard that statement from them to be able to duplicate it because they do trust their new process. Now, how much of that has to do with the fact that their scouting department has changed a little bit with I believe I forget his name. He he interviewed with the Jacksonville Jaguars for the general manager position. I'm sure that he was very involved with the last year's process. I think they feel that they can do it again. And you know what? I'd rather he say it that way, even if for better or worse, we don't know how this is going to go, than him say, yeah, you know, we got 11 picks and we'll figure it out. He seems excited, and I think that's part of it.
It could be just the draft.
Mhm.
I mean, it's hard to envision what would be a big part of the plan that's not trading away more players. We talked about the Brandon Ayuk thing. That because and I know in the chat someone brought up Trey Hendrickson, who's still out there and is still holding out. I mean, that wouldn't be part of the we're trying to spend less cash plan, right? Unless they jettison so many players and so many contracts that there's a little extra cash available to be able to make another move, and they're upgrading on the defensive line rather than paying for mediocrity. But I don't think something like that is in the cards. And even if you trade Brandon Ayuk, maybe there's a player coming back. I know that the Patriots already traded away Godshaw at defensive tackle, which would have been nice, but it's only a 7th rounder. Like they didn't want to bring on that contract either, right? So it's hard for me to imagine that the Niners bring on a big contract. Christian Barmore, he's got an injury situation of his own. I think he's dealing with some blood clots or something like that. Could they kind of have damaged goods for damaged goods with Ayuk for Christian Barmore, create a new hole by plugging another hole? That doesn't make a lot of sense either. So I don't know what big trade could possibly come down where the 49ers don't add a whole bunch of cash if the point is to not add cash this offseason. And that would be part of the idea of trading Brandon Ayuk as well, because you're not going to get the full value of Brandon Ayuk and you're not going to sit around and wait for him to be healthy to get the full value of him as a player. So it's really, I don't see the upside in trading Brandon Ayuk, but I understand if they want to not pay him $110 million and regret the contract and whatever they would get, a 3rd round pick or something, would potentially be enough for them to say, okay, we're going to go a different direction. Mismanagement of the whole situation for sure. But when it comes to this offseason, Jason, one of the big things I keep thinking about is this isn't like a thing that happened and they're like, oh man, we're screwing up this offseason. We're doing a bunch of stuff. Everything that happened this offseason was set up by something that happened prior. So learn from that. Learn from what got you here rather than learn from this offseason, because this offseason is the result of past off seasons, maybe overspending in some places. And, obviously the realities of paying a whole bunch of cash, potentially $150 million in guarantees to a quarterback.
Yeah, and the 49ers are absolutely using the Rams blueprint. And think about this, right? the Rams had a few core pieces that you still knew were good at the time. Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford. You have those guys in place, and then you have all these question marks. And the Rams had 14 rookies on their initial 53. That's a lot of rookies. But how quickly they were able to turn things around when you have those other pieces in place and the development process starts up a little bit faster. The new Jaguars GM has outlined kind of that same exact thought process about, we don't sign veteran guys because they're going to get in the way of the development of our rookies. So there is this blueprint that the 49ers are absolutely following by their hated rivals with the Rams. And you can only do that when you have the offensive core pieces, George Kittle, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams. You have that core. Yes, it's going to look crazy when you have 11 and 12 and 13 rookies on there, because let's not throw the UDFAs out, where the 49ers will likely find the next guy to compete for a running back spot as they've done before. But there is this blueprint there. The Eagles did it as well, but the Eagles did it on a less grander scale because they just really needed to fix their secondary and change their defensive coordinator. Once they got Vic Fangio in there, and then they drafted very well, obviously, Jalen Carter, they already had those guys there. But when you bring in Cooper DeJean, you add him with all these other guys, you move out Bradbury, things change quickly. But there is a blueprint the 49ers are following, and it's the Rams. And we all thought, for all intents and purposes, the Rams were cooked. We all thought that. We're like, man, look at all these holes, and they spent all this money, and it's going to take them a while to get back. Nope. They're right back in the playoffs these last 2 years. I think that's a similar thought process for the 49ers and how they're going to move about this.
So I want to get into a mock draft. Let's say the 49ers just play it straight. And I want to talk a little bit about how difficult or how easy it is for the San Francisco 49ers to start replacing talent without doing anything crazy at all. No trade of Brandon Ayuk. And we're not even talking about big trade ups or trade down and adding 20 draft picks or anything like that. Just sticking and picking and not even picking guys that are smoking values. I did a little mock draft earlier today just to kind of see what it would look like. I didn't take anybody that was graded on the PFF mock to have like fall in a crazy amount or anything like that. And I just wanted to see what it would look like with just a regular old draft and how difficult it is to replace guys, because I look at the 49ers offense now versus last season. And to be honest with you, on paper, the 49ers should be better on offense in 2025 than they were in 2024, just by the virtue of playing more games with Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey. The 49ers should be better. They lost Deebo Samuel, but they drafted his replacement last year in the first round. So if Ricky Pearsall can't be wide receiver 2 for the 49ers, then it was a bad draft pick. It's not because of the Deebo thing that they took that step back. You got Juwan Jennings. They brought in another veteran in Demarcus Robinson. And obviously you need Ayuk to come back healthy. If he is a San Francisco 49ers player, then you need him to come back healthy and play. But on offense, got the same offensive line minus Aaron Banks. Aaron Banks wasn't amazing last year. Ben Barch was just as good, right? And you got him back. You've got Spencer Burford to compete, and you have whatever players you bring in the draft to compete there on the offensive line. Clearly, the 49ers like Jake Brendel at center and Colton McKivitz at right tackle a lot more than a lot of fans do. And at worst, and look, let's be honest, the least of the 49ers problems was Colton McKivitz last year. Like, he was fine, right?
Thank you.
And so maybe they're not a plus offensive line, especially when Trent Williams isn't out there. But, they still graded out in advanced metrics as, middle of the road offensive line. I think it was 14th and by a composite ranking of all the PFFs and sports information and, ESPN and all those offensive line rankings. So the 49ers were fine on the offensive line. They should still probably be fine. And who knows, maybe add some more players that maybe they find themselves another Pooney level player to throw in there. But I still think offensive tackle is more of a future need than a current need. So if you're looking for current needs, they're almost all on the defensive side of the football, Jason.
Yeah.
And I am of the mind that Malik Collins is not a big loss. Leonard Floyd, nice player. He's a pro. Not a massive loss, right? Javon Hargrave didn't play anyway because he was hurt. Dre Greenlaw didn't play anyways because he was hurt, right? So if you start going down the line, you drafted replacements for Talanoa Hufanga. Malik Mustafa looks great. Looks like a starting caliber player. So you've got that position replaced. Renardo Green looked awesome as a rookie. He looks like he's going to be a starting outside corner. So you've got Charvarius Ward replaced. Will they be as good as those guys? Time will tell. But you've got those already taken care of, those immediate needs. And they added Trey Brown at corner, so they got 3 corners there that they like. So not a massive need at corner. You might want to look at a free safety to compete with Jair Brown, but it's really in the front 7 where you have some holes. You need some linebackers, but Dre Greenlaw, I don't know what you're going to get from him, and he was banged up all season last year anyway. Now, here's the thing, Jason. Being as good as a 6-11 team is also not good enough, so you need to get better. Can you get to 2023? Probably not. Can you replace the guys you lost this free agency period? I think you can. And to be honest with you, it's not all that difficult. And to prove that, I'm going to bring up a mock draft that I did, which is a bare bones mock draft that is not even like I'm passing on guys, right? I like everybody I drafted, I think will be there at their spot, especially in the early rounds. You could quibble about some other players that might go a little higher, a little lower. It's a little bit harder to know in some of those ranges. But I'm going to bring it up on the screen right now and talk about this mock draft, Jason. And you tell me what you think and tell me how much better or worse the San Francisco 49ers when you start plugging in some of these pieces in the draft. So I went with Kenneth Grant at pick 11. And I think that's a little bit of a reach. I think he's a first round guy, but most mock drafts have Kenneth Grant going a little bit later. But that's kind of the point I wanted to make here. So you get a 330-pound beast of a moldable piece of clay on the interior of your defensive line and should no doubt at least help your run game inside, right? So now you have a defensive line that has Nick Bosa. It has Kenneth Grant in the middle, which I think is already an upgrade over Malik Collins. Last year, the other defensive tackle that played the second most snaps is still on the roster in Jordan Elliott. I think he's going to get pushed by some interior talent that's already on the football team, and maybe some later draft picks as well. Evan Anderson's an interesting player. Now, he might be a little bit more of the big body, same position as Kenneth Grant style of player, more of a nose, one tech, 2-eye, whatever you want to call it, on the interior of that defensive line. But Kenneth Grant, Jared Ivey, I went with in the second round. I tend to think Jared Ivey's actually going to go a little bit higher than a lot of people, than consensus right now. But I went Jared Ivey just because he's one of the few big-bodied defensive ends that can also rush the passer. And, 270 pounds, ran really well at the combine. He could even move inside a little bit on passing downs and give you some rushing there. Yetur Gross-Matos could do the same thing, even though, Jared Ivey and Yetur Gross-Matos may be a little bit similar in their style, but Yetur Gross-Matos has one more year left on his contract. So you're building this thing going forward, not just for one season. So I went with Jared Ivey in the second round, mostly because he's someone that's probably very likely, at least according to consensus, going to be there. I didn't want to do some draft where it's like, hey, look, I got all these crazy values. Someone that should be a first rounder, I got him in the third round. I didn't want to do that because I just wanted to show you what this would look like. And so I talked about offensive tackles being maybe a future need rather than a current need. What about Charles Grant, who had his pro day today? I didn't see the times yet, but he's a big athletic guy. He would be a project, a future potential starter. But Charles Grant out of William and Mary, I went with him in round number 3 to be a guy who kind of redshirts and sits and maybe replaces one of the tackles in a future season, and maybe even as soon as next year. But he's got all the physical ability to potentially do that. And then I've got some more I want to talk about, but I'm going to stop here in the front 7 with a linebacker as well, Jeffrey Bassa, somebody that the 49ers are rumored to be very interested in. The Niners were at that Oregon Pro Day. Jeffrey Bassa, linebacker from Oregon, really athletic linebacker, that classic, former safety style that the 49ers like. You could plug him in at weak side backer. Maybe he could play some strong side backer. The 49ers could potentially have needs at both of those spots. But, 3 out of 4 draft picks in the front 7. And then you add a project of an offensive tackle, one of the last few guys in this draft that you're like, okay, yeah, this guy will play offensive tackle potentially in the NFL and has the physical ability maybe to be a starter, but might need some time. Now you look at the 49ers defense and you plug in just those 3 guys to the defense. And it's like, I don't feel much worse about that defense than what the 49ers ran out there in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you putting Kenneth Grant there because I think people are losing, they're like, oh, that's too high. But there's someone that would be egregiously there at 11 that you could have taken that would have been unrealistic. So what you did was, instead of trade back, you just said, this is what the first round pick is going to be. So I think we need to throw out the whole pick 11 thing and where it's at right now. Kenneth Grant absolutely fills a need because by my estimation, it's defensive tackle, edge, right? So you have Kenneth Grant. I think everybody's in love with him. a few spots behind, possibly. Maybe that's a trade back scenario for them as well too, which I kind of talked to you about, where I said I think they want Mason Graham. I don't think Mason Graham's going to be there, and if he's not, then someone's going to come up and get their guy, depending on who's there on the board. So I understand that one. The Jared Ivey thing, I do agree with you. I do think him and Yetur Gross-Matos' skill set is, I don't want to say, I guess, redundant, right? Like, it's the same thing, right? Like, they can play inside and out. But when you have that sort of flexibility, then it kind of takes away from the idea of like, oh, you have to draft defensive tackle and draft defensive tackle. And also, call me crazy, and I know everybody else is, I still think the 49ers are going to sign like one of those like 32, 33-year-old edge rushers. Zadarius Smith is the first name that kind of comes to my mind, because especially when he stepped in for Aiden Hutchinson, he still showed that he had juice, and the Lions' pressure rate actually went up. You know, take for granted take that for whatever you want. So again, you'll bring in a veteran guy like Zadarius Smith to kind of combat that. The Charles Grant thing makes a lot of sense, because Jalen Moore did leave, but people forget Spencer Burford's a left tackle. So if Spencer Burford doesn't start at left guard, that's your backup for Trent Williams if, God forbid, something happens as well, too. So you're kind of there with the depth as well, right? And then Jeffrey Bassa, again, they were at Oregon's pro day, and the noise has been getting there. And again, converted safety fits very well and can play on either side, I think, under the tutelage of Fred Warner. And we have to also frame all of this with Robert Saleh putting all these guys in position to succeed, right? I think we would feel a lot different about this if Nick Sorensen was still here and say, I don't know what he's going to be able to do with all these rookie players. Robert Saleh was taking over rookie class after rookie class when he was there with the Jets, because they were pretty bad and they were drafting really high all the time. So again, all of that context needs to be added when you look at this. Charles Grant is somebody who you can kick the can down the road a little bit. If Colton McKivitz goes and hits the free market, 49ers fans, buckle up, because he's going to get a bag, and people are going to throw money at him because he has been stable. And considering the contract that he's on right now with the 49ers, it is insane value what you've been able to get from him. So again, all of these moves make sense. And when you frame it with the idea of obviously Robert Saleh being there, the holes start to fill up fast. And now you're back in a position where, yes, these are rookie players, but you feel much better about this moving forward, because not only have you short-term fixed this line, you have long-term options for development and how this defense is going to look in years down the line.
And I see in the chat some folks talking about, different players that they like better. But that's kind of the point of this mock draft, is I didn't take the best available guy in every spot. I didn't try to find some player that should actually be going a round earlier, a half a round earlier. And you look at all the PFF big board grades are all below where I took these guys. And I did it that way on purpose to kind of illustrate, even if you don't get a bunch of smoking deals, go crazy with trades ups, down in the NFL draft, the 49ers do have a really good opportunity to replace a lot of the talent they lost because of some of the strengths in this draft class. And that's kind of the point of this mock draft, because I agree, I like Walter Nolan better than Kenneth Grant as well. But Walter Nolan also has some off-field stuff or character stuff or whatever. So those kind of things are a little bit more difficult to get a finger on. But again, the point was not to draft like some amazing draft and game the mock draft simulator. It was to draft players who very likely would be available in a lot of these spots, and how
realistic.
Realistically, the 49ers can attack this thing without that much work, and you don't feel terrible about the team versus last year. The big question is, do you get any stars? Do you really get the difference makers? Does Robert Saleh make enough of a difference? Does some health issues make enough of a difference for you to get back, not only to replace the guys you lost, but to even be better? Because obviously the 49ers were 6-11 last year. Getting back to that is not the goal. Being better than that should be the goal for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, it's not much harder to it's not harder to be any better, because they've already addressed the special teams. And if the special teams was a net zero unit, they probably win a few more games last year, right?
We just laid it out there. 2 of the 3 units already better for the San Francisco 49ers. There you go. And then they just have to do some work on the defensive side of the ball. Get a little lucky potentially with a future offensive tackle in Charles Grant. A few more picks here in the mock. The PFF is really low, by the way, on Oluwafemi Oladejo out of UCLA. Got him ranked 141. I think that might be a little low. Some folks talking about him going in round 2, I think, is also a little high. I think around 3-4 range is the right spot for him. But look, stylistically, now you get a little different player than Jared Ivey and Yetur Gross-Matos. More of a speedy edge rusher, more of a guy who can be probably a designated pass rusher early in his career. Maybe he could be an every down player. But then you look into the future, Ivey and Oladejo. It'd be a nice little combo across from Nick Bosa there at defensive end. Logan Brown, Dominic Pooney's old teammate that fits the athletic profile of what the 49ers like at tackle or guard. A little bit more ready to play Charles Grant, probably more of a guard just because I think he's got some issues on the outside, unlike his partner. And to be honest with you, I think Logan Brown long-term could play tackle or guard for the 49ers. And I think someone like Pooney could kick out to tackle eventually as well. So what about Charles Grant, Pooney, offensive tackles of the future, someone like Logan Brown that you draft and maybe another center, something like that on the interior. So I just wanted to put Logan Brown in there because I hadn't put him in a mock draft yet. And he had a pretty awesome combine and was Pooney's old teammate. So going back to the well at Kansas for the offensive line, probably not terrible. And if I'm not mistaken, I threw this in for you. Aren't you a big Trevor Etienne guy?
The biggest. I feel like you did this just for me.
100%.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you. Yes, that's a dream. That's a dream selection in round 5. Like a dream selection. Trevor Etienne will literally make everyone forget who Jordan Mason was. Like that. Like once he starts to get snaps. Like I
very
think
different player. Very different.
Very different player. Can catch the football silky smooth. My comp is Alvin Kamara. And I think that's somebody that if the it's big praise, but I believe in the guy and he's my guy, man.
And look, this is such a good draft to pull a really solid, if not potentially awesome running back on day 3 because there's so many good ones in this class. So this is probably the right areas to start attacking running back, in that comp 4th round area, round 5. Niners don't have a round 6 pick anymore. So I like that area for a running back here. Yeah. Vernon Broughton, another look again. This is 4 defensive linemen that we've brought in. A big, huge, massive a defensive tackle, a still pretty large defensive tackle, a big defensive end, more speedy, converted linebacker, pass rushing, edge rusher as well. So just a lot of different shapes and sizes. 4 defensive linemen added in through 5 rounds of the NFL draft. And then I had to throw the guy that I think is going to be one of Kyle Shanahan's draft crushes here, who actually compares pretty favorably to Mac Jones in Curtis Rourke out of Indiana. I put him in a lot of my mock drafts because he can be had a little bit later in mocks, and I really do think he's a player that Kyle Shanahan's going to like when he puts on the film. I finished it up with Tommy Hill, corner, or Rock Taylor, big athletic wide receiver out of Memphis, a lot to work with there. And then Tommy Hill out of Nebraska, a cornerback that will come up and hit you and tackle you. And if you don't like his coverage skills, maybe he's a future safety for your team as well, and probably going to be a very good special teamer. So there it is. That's the end of my mock draft. And again, a lot of holes filled with 11 draft picks. No trades, no funny business. Everybody I drafted except for I think Broughton and Curtis Rourke were ranked well below where I took them in this mock draft. So not like some unrealistic trying to game the simulator mock draft either, just to show how the 49ers probably aren't that far off from filling a lot of their holes. Maybe they're not the 2023 49ers coming up in 2025, but just replacing guys like Malik Collins shouldn't be that much of a chore.
Curtis Rourke is absolutely going to get drafted by the 49ers. If there was a way to bet, like in a sports book, where who will draft Curtis Rourke, and it's absolutely going to be the 49ers.
Somebody that late in the draft to be able to nail the player to the team as well. So I've got 3 players for Kyle Shanahan. It's Luther Burden, and if the 49ers trade Brandon Ayuk before the draft, mark it down. Luther Burden is a San Francisco 49er. Who knows? Maybe they trade Christian McCaffrey. And look, I don't think we should be shocked if Kyle Shanahan does his thing. He's like, hey, John Lynch, I'm not going to go to sleep tonight if we don't draft Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. I mean, Travion Henderson is built for that wide zone scheme. He's a phenomenal talent. I would love him in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Don't think they should be drafting a running back at pick 43, but that's probably where you have to take him if you want someone like Travion Henderson. He might be gone even before that happens, based on some of the mock drafts I'm seeing some running backs going really high. But those 3 players right now, Luther Burden, Travion Henderson, and Curtis Rourke. But there's a lot of quarterbacks that kind of fit. Max Brosmer's got a very Jimmy Garoppolo-like release. There's a lot of good backup-style quarterbacks that the Niners could target late in this draft.
Yeah, and the 49ers have obviously Brock and Mac, and they need a third emergency quarterback because Brandon Allen's in Tennessee and Josh Dobbs is in New England. And again, I think when you've shown that you've been able to find quarterbacks later in the draft, like you have with Brock Purdy, and someone who you can bring along. Plus, if Curtis Rourke comes in and he shows that he can operate the offense, then don't discount the fact that the 49ers can flip Mac Jones to somebody for a pick as well, too. So there's a lot of ways that they can attack this. It just, when I watch Curtis Rourke, I see a quarterback that when Kyle Shanahan sees him, his eyes turn red. Like, and he's just like, there he is. Like, that's it. That's exactly what he's supposed to do. Like, and it sounds like a joke, but I really, like, I sent out a tweet, like, you're going to have to, like, keep Kyle Shanahan out of the war room in the later rounds to stop him from drafting Curtis Rourke, because I think that that's just kind of where his mind's going to go at the end of this draft.
And look, Mac Jones is only on a 2-year contract, so you need to develop the next long-term backup for Brock Purdy that's cheap and on a rookie contract like that too. So I don't think just because you sign Mac Jones that, a 7th-round quarterback is off the table for the 49ers. Tommy says, what about Eric Burden? From the lead singer from the band The Animals. If you're familiar with the house, or the song The House of the Rising Sun. Eric Burden, yeah. Great pull from Tommy there. Love it.
Shout out to Tommy.
Yeah. Tommy's head's in the right place. See, that's why we've got the listeners and viewers we've got here on OT with BP and the Jason Aponte. Like the Baconte viewing audience is super high class. Smart folks.
Tommy's always in the comments cooking, man. I mean, everybody is. And shout out to everybody in here. Guys, if you're in here, like this video on both channels. It helps us out immensely. That's the best way that you could help support us. Just a quick thumbs up. We appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Do you have anything bouncing around in your head, Jason, as far as when let me take the mock draft off the screen here, when John Lynch says that, he kind of, hints that there might be something big coming, and maybe he was just saying he's excited about the draft, but they have a plan. What do you think like that big move is? Or even if it's not a big move, the biggest move, what do you think the 49ers would have up their sleeves? Or is there something you think that might be happening that maybe we haven't considered yet?
Yeah, I think the Brandon Ayuk thing really has legs, especially when you kind of connect the dots with the way that they talked about, in the story that Mike Silver put out, and Kawakami's been alluding to it. And when you start to hear, Mayoko and some of those guys start talking about it, almost feels like they're trying to soften the blow for you. I do think that there is a big interest to get out of this Ayuk contract now. One, because they don't like the way that the negotiations themselves went down and the way that Ayuk behaved. But two, they're really afraid of being stuck with this contract if Brandon Ayuk is not going to come back and be the player that they thought he would be. And they'd rather let someone else mitigate that risk and get his contract off the books and start and reset the position over again. If I had to guess, I would say Brandon Ayuk is the closest one that is on the move. And if there is something big to that, what does that mean? Does that mean the 49ers move up to 4 if they include their 11th pick and another pick, and the Patriots want to use that? It really boils down to the fact that the Patriots swung on DK Metcalf. They swung on other, they wanted to get their hands on T. Higgins. They are looking for that wide receiver to pair with Drake May. And the more and more that you hear about the Patriots, they were in on him last year, and obviously Ayuk said no, but it may not be up to him this time because the 49ers are very scared of how this is going to look in a year. You can take the chance and roll the dice that Brandon Ayuk is going to return, but if you roll the dice and you get snake eyes, you're never going to be able to move that contract, or you're going to sell him for pennies on the dollar. I think the 49ers are now looking at this as their best opportunity, aside from the year before when they could have traded him and got, very fair compensation, the best opportunity to get out from this problem and let someone else deal with this based on the fact that they didn't like how things went in the contract and they're scared about how this will go.
I'm going to actually bring up the trade chart, and shout out to Draft Tech, who I love this feature they have where you can highlight the team's draft picks. So you can see the 49ers 11 draft picks right now on the screen. That's not quite zoomed in enough actually for you to see all of them, but you can zoom in and see the 49ers draft picks and the values there. And so I want to talk about what those trades might look like here. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the New England Patriots instead, and talk about what an Ayuk trade, like what do you expect the 49ers could get for Brandon Ayuk from the New England Patriots here. So here's the Patriots draft picks here. And do you think that, zoom it in just a hair more for the folks at home. There we go. Do you think that the 49ers could close the gap, or would even want to close the gap and use Ayuk and not add, another pick just to move up? Would the 49ers want, and do you think it'd be enough for the 49ers to throw in Ayuk with their pick at 11 that's worth 1,250 points to get all the way up to New England's pick at 1,800 points? Because that feels like a lot to me, being that that's what, even more than what the New England second round pick by itself would be worth.
Mhm. Uh, it sounds like New England will probably have to throw in a pick of their own and maybe pick swap at 2, right? The second round. Which would be, a win for the 49ers to move up there as well, not only to get there at 4. So it wouldn't be an apples to apples 11 and Ayuk for 4. I don't think that really would be able to get it done. I still think New England has to send a pick, and they would have to send a later pick as well too, to move up there. But yeah, it I don't know, because what player would New England send back, right? Like in this scenario, like who could it be? I don't really see an obvious fit for that at all. So I think it would have to be a combination of Ayuk, a pick, their pick, and another pick, and possibly another pick, just to even things out at this point. And Jabril Peppers would be good. That would be really cool. I mean, Oscar's been cooking. He's really locked in this draft season.
Uh, so I think the value is probably somewhere around a third round pick, and the fact that the Patriots have a couple of them, and the Patriots could just draft, say, Armand Membo at pick number 4, unless Travis Hunter falls to them, and then there's their wide receiver probably, and that'd be one of the teams you play wide receiver for instead of cornerback, and then you could. So an Ayuk trade might have to happen draft night. In fact, it might have to happen at some point before after pick 4, but before pick 11.
Mhm.
So the
I think so.
49ers could know if they're going to be like, oh, Ted McMillan's here, we're going to draft him. We're going to draft Luther Burden. We're going to trade down and draft somebody else, or we're going to trade back up for the second round because Luther Burden is falling, right? And so the New England Patriots probably need to know who they're going to get, because if they get Travis Hunter, then they probably won't make any other moves at wide receiver. Then they'll be looking for an offensive lineman instead. And if they do draft an offensive lineman, then they might be calling the 49ers and be like, okay, let's put this plan into place. And maybe that's part of the plan. And so at some point, Thursday night after pick 4 and before pick 11, we hear Brandon Ayuk has been traded to, and actually, to be honest with you, probably the 49ers would want that not to be announced until after their pick. So that way they don't announce to everybody in the world that now they need a wide receiver, so a team doesn't trade up in front of them and grab a wide receiver. So we might see the 49ers draft a wide receiver and go, what? They drafted another wide receiver? And then be like, oh, and Brandon Ayuk is on his way to the New England Patriots. So that might be the timing of the thing if Brandon Ayuk does get traded, especially to the New England Patriots.
Yeah, and isn't there a roster bonus that is due before the draft, if I'm not mistaken, that with Brandon Ayuk being on the roster?
That's true. That's another factor in this, because if they trade him, it's like April 1st or something like that. That's when one of the roster bonuses is due. So,
and it's a big one.
Yeah, it might have to be a situation where Ayuk has to be traded before that point, or else for cash reasons, it doesn't make sense.
The only way that would probably work is if they agree to the idea of wherever we trade you, they're going to take the contract and then they'll award you that. But it's hard with that number floating around, because you still can't do that. You still can say, hey, listen, when we make this move with you, you do owe him this amount of money because this is what's on the contract. But why would we give him the money right now if he's not going to be on our roster, right? Because I don't think you can trade that number away. So that's the thing, is like that roster bonus is the little part that has me a bit skeptical that this will happen on draft night, but there are ways to navigate around that. And I think if the 49ers are as steadfast as I believe in trying to clear this money off their books and move Brandon Ayuk, then they'll find a way to make that happen.
Here's the other wrinkle in that, because you could just restructure it, but that would mean Brandon Ayuk would have to want to go there.
Right.
Brandon Ayuk would have to say, oh yeah, I want to restructure this contract and move this bonus from April 1st to May 1st. Mm-hmm. And so he would have to be willing to do that. And then if we hear about that, and who knows, maybe we won't hear about that sort of contract restructure because they'll want it to be on a hush, then we'll kind of know what's up potentially. So,
but I don't know if they won't announce that.
At this point, if they don't change the contract, they're going to trade him before April 1st, or probably not at all.
Yeah, they won't announce that. But also, I do agree with you on the idea of, if you trade him before April 1st, you're letting everyone know what's about to happen. And you don't want that, right? Like, you want to keep it close to the vest. The pick to number 3 thing with the 49ers, it didn't matter. Nobody was going to move ahead of them because the Jets weren't going to move 2 and the Jags aren't going to move 1. So you were going to get your quarterback. Even when you did that early, you knew. But if you do this and it's not for a higher pick, and you're just going to stick at 11 and maybe you move Ayuk for a higher second round or third round, you're telegraphing everything. So that's the monkey wrench that's kind of thrown in here. Is this roster bonus? Does Ayuk want to go there? And then do you want to signal to everybody that that's what one of your draft prospects is going to be? That's the little stuff that I feel like is going to be in the way of this, because I don't know if you can keep all of that on the hush all the way into draft night without signaling what you want to do.
But maybe the 49ers still don't want to draft a wide receiver at 11 anyway, even if they trade Brandon Ayuk too. So
I don't think they do.
That could be part of it. And Ariel says, could we trade BA for both the Pats' third-round picks? I don't think so. I think that'd probably be too much. The way to get more, so I think it's probably he should be again, the 49ers probably, even with the money and the cash they might not like, they're not going to trade him for nothing. They're not going to trade him for like a 6th-round pick or whatever. You know, that's not going to happen. That's not how the 49ers operate. A 3rd-round pick still would signal something pretty foolish from the 49ers versus the value he had and be mismanagement of the whole situation. But I think a 3rd could potentially get it done, especially that earlier 3rd. I mean, the Patriots have 2 3rds and aren't that far apart, 69 and 77. Pick 69 is probably what I would guess if Ayuk got traded right now to the Patriots. It'd be
a nice pick.
9. Nice pick for sure. But I wonder if could you talk if the Patriots were willing to trade that pick for Ayuk and the deal isn't done right now, or the 49ers angling for that second, and could the 49ers throw, say, pick 100 in with Ayuk to get the higher pick and get pick number 38 instead? So that would be kind of the way for the 49ers to say, like, look, okay, you're not going to lose any. We're going to throw in an extra pick for you so you don't lose your total number of picks, because I know you're a rebuilding franchise, but we want the 2nd-round pick, but we'll give you a late 3rd-round pick that's worth about 100 points to go with it so we can get the 2nd-round pick. Could the 49ers pull that off? And still, I don't know if the Patriots would part with number 38 for Brandon Ayuk right now, even though that was already on the table. Like, that would be the 49ers pick right now. If Brandon Ayuk was willing to go to New England, the Niners would be getting ready to spend pick number 38. The 49ers would have already been ready to spend that pick that the Steelers just sent for DK Metcalf, right? A 2nd and a 5th is what was coming back. So if you trade him for a 3rd or even less after you could have got a 2nd and a 5th, and you in a bad contract on top of that, by your own estimation, I mean, that's mismanagement for sure. Yeah. I mean, this whole Brandon Ayuk thing is ridiculous.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is this wide receiver class, it doesn't have those top end, like, gotta have it guys. Like, Tet's up there at the top. Matthew Golden's getting a lot of buzz. Obviously, Emeka, like those guys, that's fine. Those aren't the guys that I'm enamored with. The guys that I like in this draft are in that range, in that 3rd, 4th round, right? Like, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins and Jack Beck, like those are the guys that I'm really enjoying, watching, and they're becoming my favorite receivers. So you're not going to be replacing Ayuk with a 1-for-1 type of, Marvin Harrison or Garrett Wilson or like one of those top end guys. This isn't a top heavy wide receiver class. The real value is going to be in the middle rounds and the middle of where guys are ranked, and there's going to be a lot of surprises. So I don't mind with that, and I do agree with your sentiment of you could have got so much more for him last year and not paid him. But the 49ers were in love with the idea of running it back, trying to get back to the Super Bowl because they had gotten so close. So, they lost sight of the forest by staring at the trees last season, and that is what they're trying to correct now in this draft and this offseason.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why I keep saying this offseason wasn't the thing. This was the result of the thing they did before that got them in this situation. Pats aren't trading their 3rd for BA. That's crazy talk. I don't know. It's so hard to know because Brandon Ayuk's for sure worth a 3rd-round pick, right, for a team. And here's the thing is the Patriots would now be paying him less money. They'd be taking on a lot of money, but the 49ers already paid him a lot, paid him a signing bonus. So it's not like they're taking on the entire contract either. If they were willing to pay a 2nd plus for Brandon Ayuk and give him the entire contract already, this is a bargain on their end too, less than a year away. So it might be that they wouldn't be willing to give up anything. In that case, Ayuk staying with the 49ers, unless they really hate that contract so much that they would just want the contract gone, and it doesn't matter if picks are coming back. And in that case, I think, he would already be a New England Patriot if that was the case.
Right. And I think, again, it's just this game now of what will Brandon Ayuk look like after his recovery from tearing all the CLs. This isn't your run of the mill ACL tear where, guys bounce right back, thank you to modern medicine. And I think that's when you combine all the factors with the way that they didn't like how things went. Kyle Shanahan stopped them from trading him, and then you pay him, and now he has this devastating injury. And now, this is like a shit or get off the pot moment where you stick with Brandon Ayuk, but you're hoping that he comes back to be that guy that he used to be. But if you stick with him and he doesn't, you're going to have that contract largely unmovable. And now you have all that money on your books for a player that's not going to be as productive as you believed he would be when you signed him to that deal. There has to be a little bit of buyer's remorse, and there has to be a little bit of mitigating that risk by saying, if someone's willing to give us this, this, and this, and take the contract, then we're willing to bet on ourselves again in the draft that we can find someone who can contribute, because we do believe in the guys that we've already drafted. And there is someone there that Kyle Shanahan and this offense can get the most out of. So it's interesting, and it's going to go down to the wire, I think. Absolutely. But that April 1st roster bonus really has really thrown a monkey wrench into all this. If that wasn't there, then you feel like, okay, this is a collision course towards his draft day trade, but they've got to find a way to get that money pushed back without telling anybody, and he has to agree. So this is far from over. But if we're talking about the big move that John Lynch is talking about, I feel like it's this.
Ayuk feels like the most obvious. I mean, could it be Christian McCaffrey? Because he's one of the guys that could save them the most cash by trading this offseason, aside from Nick Bosa and I think Fred Warner. And those probably aren't going to be the guys that are on the move. But if you want a shocker, you go even further up the list with those guys. I don't think that one is in the cards for the 49ers. Those are foundational pieces. It's harder to say a running back that's past the age of 28, coming off the injuries. McCaffrey is that would be a foundational piece for the 49ers, even though they love McCaffrey. But then again, is a team going to trade a lot for a guy who's banged up like that? So the other thing with Ayuk too is you probably, if you're the Patriots, you want to go as far into the offseason as possible to see how his recovery is going, because you're definitely going to have a meeting with the doctors before you make a trade like that. And is his recovery going really great? And then they'd be like, oh yeah, he's going to be back probably for week 1, or at least the worst by October. And cool, we're not going to win a Super Bowl this year anyway. So that's another big part of it as well. One more note here on this whole thing before we go. And look, the sun's starting to creep down into my face here because of the, I'm going to go this way because it's that time of day. I think that's a sign that we should wrap this thing up. How do you, there's feelings involved. There's human beings involved here. If you're Kyle Shanahan, I'll bring a lot of people can be involved here, but specifically Kyle Shanahan and Brandon Ayuk. If you're Kyle Shanahan and Brandon Ayuk, and you get up in the morning and you're like, oh, let's get some coffee. Let's see what's in the newspaper. And basically the owner of your football team is like, we don't want this baby making any more decisions about our roster because he's like a 13-year-old, he's like a junior high girl that likes a different boy every week. And we don't want this guy making decisions about our franchise. And then if you're Brandon Ayuk and they're like, we just signed this guy. We don't really like him that much. And we overpaid him and we want him gone. Like, they can't feel great about what's been reported, and clearly that reporting is coming from the top of the top, or it's either one of the DeBartolo Yorks, probably Jed, or Parag, or one of the other Marates. I don't know. Like, who else could these reports be coming from like Silver and Kawakami, right? It's coming from Jed.
Of course, it absolutely is. And that's why that's not a leap of faith to believe these stories, because they're confirmation for things that we already surmised. And then you throw in the whole practice shorts thing and the way the body language looked like during the thing. I don't think they're all the way in love with, one, the way Ayuk handled himself during the negotiations, two, the way he acted afterwards he got his money. So all of this tracks. All of it actually tracks. And it's absolutely coming from the building. It's absolutely, when you hear we're going to be more ruthless, we have cost cutting, we need to get all this stuff off the books, and we need to reset our cap. All this stuff is tracking right now. These reports are not things that we're learning. They're confirmation to the words and actions of this team so far. And all of these things you don't have to be inside of the building to know that the 49ers did not like the way that Ayuk thing went, and they felt like they got taken to the woodshed. Because I'm going to stand on business and say this as much as I can. The 49ers are far more worried about winning the deal than getting the right player at this point. They have to win the deal, and if you don't sign the deal that they want, then you can walk because you're not in the plans. And if you do sign the deal, we want to look like we won and we're the master negotiators. They didn't like the way it happened with Nick Bosa, but there's nothing you can do about that because you do need that young man. They definitely didn't like the way that this happened with Brandon Ayuk, and they did not like the way he acted after. Throw on the injury and you have a whole other layer. This is absolutely coming from the building, and none of this is made up by anybody. It's not clickbait, any of those things. This is exactly coming from the higher-ups.
In the chat, Mike Shanahan is Mike Silver's source, and we do know that they are close. That would be interesting too, because like that's the head coach who stopped the trade and immediately being like, "Oh, never mind, I don't like this guy and I don't want him around." That's almost worse than if it was Jed.
Mm-hmm.
But then if it was Kyle, it wouldn't be about the cash though either, because he's not paying the money.
And I think what frustrates them the most is that Kyle and the front office were lockstep for a while about, listen, we're gonna cut our losses and move on from him. And then the Pearsall thing starts to happen, like you don't know if he's gonna be ready. And then you start to look around on the offense, and then he's like, oh, you know what? I do need Brandon Ayuk, and he just runs back upstairs. I do think that there was an understanding between all of them, and they did not like the idea that all of a sudden Kyle said, "Okay, no, I don't feel like that anymore. We need to keep him actually," and it just deviated from the plan that they had all agreed on. Because I do think that Kyle got cold feet going into the season about what it would be like to have a wide receiver group without Brandon Ayuk.
It's a fascinating football team, and it is a lot like Game of Thrones. And shout out to Oscar, I believe, in the chat. It's the golden hour. I think it's time to go. The sun is setting on this episode of Overtime. Appreciate you, Jason, jumping on. You can find this program on Jason Aponte's channel as well. We're doing it weekly. We're doing homes and homes, and having a good time doing it in the process. Make sure you check out Jason at Jason Aponte 2103. Find his work at Niners Nation, including the latest article talking with the Iowa State coach, which is a really good one, and a number of different subjects, including Brock Purdy. And you can find me on Locked On 49ers daily. I'm about to go live with Croc a little bit later this evening. I think about 8 p.m. we're going to do it up. So join us there. And of course, you can just catch our pods every single day when you drive to work, whenever it is, on the audio side as well. And Peacock and Williamson, that's the other one you should subscribe to. Myself and former NFL scout Matt Williamson on the Locked On Network, breaking down the entire NFL every single day.
You see the comment? Do we have to comment on it?
Uh-oh. What is it?
Did you see the 49ers media bracket?
Oh, no, I didn't see it.
You didn't see it?
No.
Oh.
Why? Did you see the seeds?
I did. I don't like the matchup for myself in the second round if I do get past there, but you know what? We'll take it round by round. I think the furthest I've ever gotten in the bracket when it was much smaller was the Elite Eight. But I think Vish Kumar, and he washed me out the last time, and then I think I ran into David Lombardi last year, and I was just like, all right, guys, like I'm just a lowly content creator. How am I supposed to jump these guys, man? This is not fair, man. But that's what happens when you move on. When you're a small school, sometimes you run up against Duke, and and that's it. It's just your Cinderella run is over. So
Aponte's very McNeese State, I think, in his run potentially. Yeah. Did they knock off Clemson today, by the way? Did they win that game? I thought
they beat Clemson.
They did? Okay. Vish is big on the internet. You got to watch out for him. I have a bone to pick with Rob. I believe it's Rob Guerrero, right, that does the bracket. Mm-hmm. He always picks me against my guy Crocker.
Mm-hmm.
And like the first round.
It's random.
The size of the bracket.
And it's random.
Yeah.
So I think it was last year he pit me and Steph Sanchez against each other. And I'm just like, dude, like, what are we doing? Like, if we run into each other eventually, it's like, damn, like, what's next? Me and Pasquini fighting each other the next time? Like, my God, man, like, this is really hard.
Oh, man. All right. Thanks, everybody. Check in next week. Make sure you subscribe to all the things. Talk to you then. Bye.